Hi, good morning, good evening to all of you wherever you are. Today's video is on use cases. This is a use case tutorial where I'll be discussing what is a use case, when do you create use case diagrams, what are the different elements and the relationship between use cases and how to create use cases diagrams online. So let's start with what is a use case. A use case is a visual model. It is created very early on in a project. By creating use cases, we actually fix up the scope for the upcoming project. In a way, it kind of allows us to manage the entire scope of work as far as requirements are concerned. It's an easy to create diagram, and as mentioned earlier, it's a visual diagram. So before we start creating the use case model for the case study, let's first understand what is a use case. A use case diagram comprises of an actor, use case, a connector, and the relationships between the use cases. An actor is an external entity which interacts to perform a task in the proposed system or is expected to carry out a task in the proposed system. Actors are shown with a human-like interface. A task or a use case is the action performed by the actor. A connector is the connector between the actor and the use case to indicate that this particular task is being carried out by the actor. We will discuss the relationship as we start drawing the diagram. A use case model for a system shows all the use cases and actors for that system, as you can see on this screen. And all the use cases are contained by a rectangular diagram which indicates that these use cases are part of the system. As you can also see, the actors are outside this boundary, the rectangular boundary, indicating that actors are external entities. They are not something which is part of the software system which is going to be developed. Now let's look at the case study before we get into creating the use case model. This is a case study of a bank called Frinsley Bank, which is a new bank and has got banking permission recently. Apart from banking operations setup, they also need to provide online banking services to its customers just like any other bank will do. The bank wants to offer banking, credit card, home loans, auto loans and many such services over the coming years. But they have decided to start with the basic online banking services as they expect a large number of customers to get enrolled. Now you have to create a use case model to capture the key functionalities and also to get an agreement with the customer. So we'll start by identifying the actors. So the step one in creating a use case model is to conduct your own research based on the BRD or the needs given to you by the customer. You can also rely on discussion with the customers to identify the key functionalities for a particular given project. So what will you do? You'll start by identifying the key functions. In this case, these are the key functions which you can see on your screen. Check balance, check last 5 transactions, add beneficiary, transfer funds to the beneficiary, log in, get detailed statements, pay utility bills. There could be more, but let's restrict ourselves to these functionalities for the sake of this video. So once you've identified the functions, the next step is to identify who are the actors for each function. For example, for checking balance, obviously the logged in bank customer would be the actor who will be doing this action. As you can see, in each of the cases, the actors are identified and written in front of the functions. Now take up 2 specific cases where there are more than one actor. First one is transfer funds. Now transferring fund to any other account in another bank cannot happen without the involvement of other agencies. Let's call them as external organizations. Now these external organizations could be central bank, payment corporations or any other entities. Let's put them together as one actor called external organization. Similarly, while you're paying the utility bills, the utility payments go to the utility companies and they have to confirm that they have received the payment so that the customer's account can be updated. So it is possible to have more than one actor for certain use cases, as now you can see on the screen. Now step number 3 is to identify if there are relationships between the use cases. Typically in most of these systems, the functions will not happen in isolation, they will be connected to each other. For example, here the transferring funds to the beneficiary cannot happen unless the beneficiary is added into the system. Of course, there are cases where now banks provide you the ad hoc payment facilities, but let's ignore that for the time being. Also, before the funds can be transferred, there has to be a check whether the amount which is intended to be transferred exists in the payer's account. So let's say I want to transfer 10,000, I need to have 10,000 in my account, otherwise I cannot transfer. Bank is not going to transfer on your behalf. So these are the relationships where adding beneficiary or checking balance are mandatory before funds transfer can take place. So that's a dependency kind of a relationship. There's another kind of a relationship which I'll explain as we start creating the use case model. So now I will show how to create the use case model using a free online tool. So I'm going to use draw.io. Let's go to draw.io. So now this is the tool and this is the interface where you can create the use case model. Now to do the use case modeling, you scroll down and open the UML section here. Now as you scroll down, you can see that some of the shapes for creating the UML diagrams are already there. In our case, we are creating the use case model. This is an actor. So I will draw the actor here. Next to the actor is the use case. I will draw the use case and then I will type in saying that this is check balance, and then I will go to the actor, put my cursor here and drag this to connect to the check balance. I will take one more, put it here and say add beneficiary. That is the second one. Again I will go here, drag it to this one. I will drag one more, which is transfer funds. So now you can see that we have created 3 use cases with one actor. So I will name this actor by double clicking on the actor, saying bank customer. We can have multiple actors as I mentioned. So in this case, we know that external organization are going to play a role in this case. So we will say external org. Now again I will use the same formula and put it here. So now there are 2 actors for one particular use case and others have only one actor, which is the bank customer. So depending on the scenario, you can have multiple actors. It is possible to have 3 actors as well. Okay. Next thing is, as I mentioned, the transfer funds has a relationship with adding beneficiary because it cannot happen without it. Similarly, it cannot happen without checking the balance. So that relationship is a mandatory relationship. Checking balance is mandatory, otherwise it can lead to problems for the bank. So how do you show that? This is called a dependency relationship, and here there is an arrow which specifically talks about use. This is a dependency. So if you put your button cursor here, you can see that is showing dependency on the right side. Okay. So I will connect this to transfer funds and then I will put it here. So the transfer funds is using check balance. That is one way to show dependency. In some cases, or in UML terms, this is known as include, and it is written like this. I can change this so that it starts representing the correct notation. So, just now we saw how to create the use case diagrams, including the actor use cases in online tool. Now, before I go back and draw the entire use case model for Finchley Bank, let me give you some information on the relationship between the use cases. There are two kinds of relationships. One is called include, one is called extend. So, include is a relationship which typically is used to represent two things. One, something which is common across multiple use cases, or something which is mandatory. Mandatory in the sense one use case depends on the other. Now, common functionality is login. All the functionalities which we have seen just now, checking balance, last 5 statements, adding beneficiary, all of these cannot be done unless the bank customer has logged in. So, login becomes a common functionality. But login is such a well known common functionality that typically we do not represent it in the diagram, because otherwise it will become too clumsy. But mandatory relationships are important to show. For example, you cannot transfer funds without adding a beneficiary. Similarly, you cannot transfer funds unless you check the balance. If the sufficient balance is not available, you cannot transfer funds. Bank is not going to put in money from their own pockets. So, in this case, the base use case is incomplete without the included use case. So, I will show you the example of include. So, let us go to draw.io again, and you can see transfer funds is there. Here you can see that there is a dependency arrow which is available here. So, I drag it here, put the non-arrow side in the base use case, and then connect it to check balance. Now, this indicates, or this is to be read like this: transfer funds use check balance. I will just drag it here to make it a little more clearer so that you can understand it better. Now, in UML terms, this is used and shown like this. It is called include. Draw.io has a different representation, but that is for understanding that this is a dependency relationship. In UML terms, it is called include with double arrows, that indicates stereotype. So, transfer funds include check balance. It cannot happen without checking balance. Now, let us go back and see another type of relationship. So, the next type of relationship is called extend. This is a conditional dependency or optional relationship, and this can happen when there is a special case which arises because of certain conditions. For example, in India, if you are transferring funds and the value of the fund which is being transferred is more than 200,000 in Indian currency, then you need to use a specific type of transaction that is called RTGS. Okay? It is a high value but a real time transfer fund functionality. Most of the banks provide that functionality. So, this is only a case when the amount to be transferred is higher than a particular amount. So, this is an optional relationship and it only exists in certain cases. So, if you want to represent that, how are you going to represent that? To represent that, let us go back to draw.io and show it. So, when I am showing transfer funds, we have a special case where transfer high value amount. This becomes a special case, and to show that we have extends. I click it here. Now, please remember that this works in a reverse manner. So, the arrow is towards the base use case and it is read like this: transfer funds is extended by transfer high value amount. So, this means that this is a special case which will only happen in case of transfer value being more than a certain amount. So, these are the two types of relationships which exist between use cases. One is a mandatory relationship, one is an optional relationship. So, now going back to our entire case study with all the functionalities which we had identified, and then I will show the entire thing in one use case model. So, let us go back to the use case model for the entire. So, now you can see that this is the complete use case model for the case study which we are using. So, there is an actor called bank customer, external org and utility company. I have just put in a few colors just to make it little more distinctive. So, you can change the color by selecting this and choosing the style. Similarly, for use cases, instead of the white background, I have chosen this one. Just kind of make it a little more distinctive as to which one is a use case and which one is an actor. As you can see, I have shown all the use cases which we discussed. The extend relationship is existing here. The dependency relationships are also shown here. One additional thing which has come in here is this box, which I earlier mentioned that this is a way to represent a system. What is contained or what are the functions of this particular system. So, in this case, I have also captioned it as Finchley Bank. Now, that is available in the UML stencils here. That is called a frame. So, you can drag it here and just double click and rename it. Now, this particular diagram represents the use case model for the case study which we have picked up. Now, this is a very simple to understand diagram which we can take to the stakeholders or the customers to show that okay, these are the things which we are planning to, or this is what we have understood to be part of this particular proposed system. As this is a visual representation, it is easy for the customer also to understand it and give you a go ahead. This also works as a reference point for the upcoming system. So, this is the final version of the use case model for the case study which we have picked up. Of course, the number of use cases and the functionalities in a retail banking system are going to be much more than what is represented here, but as far as the case study was concerned, we have picked up these limited number of use cases. So, in this tutorial, we looked at UML diagrams, which is a use case diagram, and how to create it, what are the different elements and relationship between the use cases. Just to summarize before we end, use case is a type of UML diagram, it is a visual diagram and it is used to capture high level functionality. It is used early on in the project, and similar to use cases, we also have user stories which are also used to capture high level requirements. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you like the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.